You know, the wisdom literature in the Old Testament, Job, Psalm, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, is interesting. It's a little more difficult, I think, to understand or to interpret sometimes. And that's certainly true of the book of Ecclesiastes. You read some of the things in here and you think, man, I think there's probably more to get out of this than what I'm getting. And certainly I feel that way about Ecclesiastes, but I also feel like, wow, there's so much in this book that is so right. You can see it, and I wish I'd have known it when I was your age. There are a lot of things that I've learned by experience that, well, we already had the experience in the scriptures if I'd only known. So I'm excited to get to talk about this with you guys and to see what's being said here. This is kind of set up as a narrator that's citing a whole almost book of the preacher. But the frame, the first couple verses and about the last 6 verses, is by the narrator. And so you've kind of got a book within a book. That's just the way this is kind of presented for us. And so we'll sort of look at it that way. Somebody want to read the first 2 verses here of Ecclesiastes 1? So I don't know who this narrator was, but he's citing that we've got in this book the words of the preacher. There's some debate about what that word preacher means. It means an assembler, really. A lot of people think it means somebody who assembles people to teach them. Some people think it means somebody who assembled all the material that's being taught. But whatever, we're going to call him the preacher. And what does he tell you about the preacher here?
Son of David, King of Jerusalem.
Yes. Now, I'm not going to debate the authorship. I have my question marks about that, but I think the most natural reading from several respects is that this is talking about Solomon. So I'm just going to assume that. If you think otherwise, I won't try to argue you out of that. There are some reasons why it's reasonable to question that, perhaps. But I think the most natural reading is that Solomon, it certainly does seem in the book itself to reflect experiences that Solomon had. We know that Solomon was the wisest man that had lived to that point. So I don't see that there's going to be a big problem for us in thinking that it's Solomon for the purposes of this book. And I'd much rather look at what it's saying than debate, who may have been the preacher or whoever. So we'll just say it's Solomon, and if you don't agree, that's okay. Look at the conclusion. This is kind of a book that starts with the end. He cites the preacher's words that were kind of like how he sums up everything. And he really sums up everything in one word, and that word is what?
Vanity.
Vanity. Now, what does vanity mean?
Meaningless.
Yeah, meaningless, empty. Something that doesn't have any substance to it. And that's his conclusion about what? All. Everything is vanity. Everything's empty. Now, it doesn't look like it. It looks like, wow, there's a lot of stuff that's really something in this life. And if you got enough of it, it'd really fill you up. But he's saying, well, it's just empty. You ever gone out on a cold morning and you see your breath? That's kind of cool, isn't it? I go down to some place in Brazil, they've never seen their breath. It never gets that cold. It's kind of weird to talk to them. They say they've seen it on films and things like that. I've never actually seen it. But do you remember when you first kind of noticed that you could see your breath? I don't know if you can remember back that far. But it's like, whoa, this is cool. Did you ever try to catch it? And what happens? There's not really anything there. You try to catch, you don't get anything. That's the way life is. It looks impressive. It seems like, man, this is really going to be something. But you try to get it, and there's really not anything. That's Solomon's conclusion, after he'd examined a whole bunch of stuff, and after he'd lived life for a long time, is it all really is kind of empty. It's all kind of like your breath. It's kind of a mirage. There's really not much to it. Now, the term vanity is used 40 times in Ecclesiastes and 33 times in all the rest of the Old Testament put together. So obviously, this is a big word in Ecclesiastes. And when he says vanity of vanities, that's kind of the Hebrew way of saying the most vanity. They didn't have a superlative, so they just did vanity of vanities. Kind of like saying the holy of holies. That means the most holy. So it's just empty. It's really, really empty. And it's all that way. There's nothing that really will fill you up in this life. How do you feel about learning that?
Kind of depressing.
It's depressing. That's not what you wanted to hear, was it? But I'm going to use my favorite illustration, one of them, about this book. I have these illustrations that, if you've heard me teach Ecclesiastes before, you're going to hear this for, But it's kind of like your oven goes out. You ever had an oven go out? You're a little young for that. But you go down to the appliance store, and you buy this big appliance, this big box. It says on it refrigerator, refrigerator. And you take it home, and you put your food in it to cook. And guess what? It doesn't cook your food. So you start messing with the dials, the gizmos, and one thing or another. It still doesn't cook your food. You start, beating on it and shaking it and, kicking it and all that, and it still doesn't cook your food. And somebody comes along and says, listen, Gary, I hate to break this to you, but that refrigerator, it's never going to cook your food. Now, would the guy who informed me of that be doing me a favor, or would he be trying to hurt me?
A favor.
Why? I don't want to know that it won't cook my food. Why would it be doing me a favor?
Save your energy.
Yeah. The fact is, he's not going to cook my food whether I think it will or not. It's not. It's better off that I find that out and quit trying to kick it and beat it and shake it. And maybe I can find something out of it that'll do some good. Maybe I can use it to conserve some food. But, it's kind of like finding out the facts sometimes is depressing, but you might as well know. It's not going to help you to still, operate under the illusion that that refrigerator is going to cook your food. You're just going to spoil a whole bunch of food trying to cook it in there. And so that's kind of what this is. It's really kind of disappointing. It's kind of depressing. But on the other hand, it's kind of one of those depressing facts that you better find out up front, and that way you're not going to try to get something out of life that it's not going to give you. And that's exactly how we need to see this. Now, there's a purpose behind this. In verse 3, he's going to talk about under the sun. What we're really saying is everything in this life that relates to this life is empty. Now what he's really trying to do is create in us a dissatisfaction and a hunger for something else. We need something to fill us up, but it's not going to be under the sun. It's not going to be stuff here. And so if it's kind of like finding out the refrigerator won't cook my food, it creates a hunger for some other appliance that might. And so nothing here is going to fill you up. It's all going to be empty. It's all going to look like, man, this is really something I can really get. And then when you get there, it's just going to kind of evaporate. It's going to be like, whoa, well, what about this? Maybe it'll be that. Well, no, what about this? And maybe I just need more. So we'll talk about those ideas here in a second. Do you have comments and questions on these first two verses? All right, 3 to 11. All right, so what advantage does man have in all his work? What value, what profit, what residual value is there? And he says nothing. There's nothing you really get out of this life under the sun. Now, the phrase under the sun is used 25 times in Ecclesiastes and 0 times in the rest of the Old Testament. So that's a big thing. It's limiting the field of investigation to under the sun. And his total goal is to make us look beyond the sun. Now, he illustrates this with some illustrations from life that really point out an idea. He says a generation goes, a generation comes, goes, comes, goes, comes, and nothing ever really happens. You live, you die, you live, you die, you live, you die. That's kind of the way it is. It's kind of monotonous repetition. Or it's like the sun. What happens in the morning with the sun?
Rises up.
And in the evening?
Goes down.
And in the morning?
Comes up.
And in the evening?
Goes down.
And how long has that been going on? Pretty much as long as you can remember. As long as anybody you know can remember. And that's kind of what you're anticipating happening tomorrow. And that seems to move a whole lot. It's always going around, but it never goes anywhere. Never really accomplishes anything. That's kind of the way life is. It's a flurry of activity, but it never really goes anywhere. Or it's like the wind. The wind's blowing, this way now? And I don't know, tomorrow it'll be blowing back the other way. And then back this way. And then back. Nothing really ever happens. Or it's like, I love this one, verse 7. You ever thought about this? Have any idea the quantity of water that goes into the oceans, or, like, I don't know, the Mississippi going into the Gulf of Mexico, I think it is, isn't it? I wonder how much water goes into the Gulf of Mexico from the Mississippi, like, per second. I bet a ton. Wow. And it's been going on for a good while. Reckon when's the Gulf of Mexico going to fill up and just kind of start overflowing? Why doesn't it do that anyhow? Y'all are science majors. What happens?
Water evaporates.
Yeah, you got that water cycle business. So it never fills. So you got all this water comes in, it comes in, but nothing ever happens. That's the way life is. A lot of activity, a lot of motion, a lot of things going on, but nothing never really gets anywhere. Nothing's ever really accomplished, never really fulfills you. It's too empty. It's kind of like, when you were little, did you ever go to a circus and ride the merry-go-round, those horses, the carousel? You ever ride those horses that go up and down and up and down? Did you like those? Seemed like you were really going someplace, man, up and down and around. But when you stopped, where were you?
Same place.
Yeah, same place you started. A lot of movement for not going anywhere, but that's the way life is. I mean, if we're going to do all this stuff, you'd like for it to go somewhere. You'd like to accomplish something. And it doesn't really do that, so he says in verse 8, all things are wearisome, man is not able to tell it, the eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor is the ear filled with hearing. It doesn't fill you up. A lot of things happen, but no real progress. Now, when you find that out, there's two possible responses. Here's the response most people have. You realize this didn't fill me up. So what do most people do to try to deal with the fact that they weren't filled up?
Eat more.
Yes! I gotta get more! And that didn't fill you up, so what do you need? More! It's kind of like eating celery. I don't know if this is scientifically true, but I have heard that it takes more calories to digest the celery than what you get out of it. Have you ever been really hungry, sat down to a big plate of celery, and you eat it? And if it's true that it takes more calories to digest it than what you get out of it, guess what happens after you eat the celery?
They're still hungry.
Actually, you're hungrier. And so you get even a bigger plate of celery, and you wolf that down. And guess what? You're hungrier yet. So you get even more celery, and you start feeding it with both hands. Will it ever dawn on you, I don't think it's a quantity question here. I just don't think it's going to do. Or, I've never experienced this, thankfully, but I understand that if you're out in the middle of the ocean and you get really thirsty, it's not a really good idea to drink the ocean water that's salty, because guess what happens?
Gets you thirstier.
It gets you thirstier, so you drink more of the ocean water, and it gets you thirstier. And eventually, I don't know, but it like dehydrates you. It's kind of an odd thing to think about. But we get life, I don't care what you're looking for. Whatever you think might fill you up. Maybe it's money. A lot of people it is. So they get a certain amount of money, and, well, you know what? It's not doing it. I need more. So they get more. That's right. I need more, Well, sooner or later we got to come to realization, I'm not getting it here. It's like celery and salt water. It's never going to fill me up. I just get hungrier and thirstier and more dissatisfied. That's what he's trying to tell us about everything under the sun. It never will fill you up. I don't care what it is not going to fill you up. You're not going to be satisfied because it won't do it. It's just, that's not the design of it. So, a lot of things happen in life, but nothing really changes. Nothing really new, nothing really productive, and nothing that's going to make you wake up in the morning and say, I'm really satisfied with this. And it doesn't even have to be sinful things. Even things that are okay in life that aren't necessarily bad in and of themselves, they're not going to fill us up. They may not be morally evil, but if you're looking at them to satisfy you, you're going to be pretty disappointed. Yeah, you shouldn't have to make the same mistakes everybody else makes. Paul Earhart says you need to learn on other people's tuition. They paid the price and you get the lesson out of it. And that's exactly what we need. And you're exactly right. I mean, and he's going to make the point several times in the book that he's really tried it all. I mean, the only thing you'll do if you try the same thing is you'll just repeat the same experiment, you'll get the same results. Better off not to have the headache. There's better ways to live than always dreaming that if you just had more of this, that, or the other thing, you get filled up. Good comment. Other comments or thoughts? All right, 12 to 18. All right, this is kind of the point we made. He was king in Jerusalem, and he really set his mind in verse 13 to seek and explore by wisdom concerning all that's been done under heaven. He really made an extensive search, an intensive search. And his conclusion, having kind of seen it all, having experienced everything, what was his conclusion?
Meaninglessness.
Yeah. It's vanity, empty, and he uses another expression that he uses quite often in the book. It's all what?
Striving after wind?
Yeah, chasing the wind. You ever tried to do that? No?
Yes.
Yeah, have you? Well, and did you manage to catch it?
No.
No. Chasing the wind seems like kind of a pointless task. I don't think you'll get it, but if you did, I don't think you'd get anything. That's what Solomon's saying about life. You're not really going to get it, and if you did get it, you wouldn't have anything once you got it. That's his conclusion about everything under the sun. I know it's depressing. It's the refrigerator. You got to learn the depressing facts so that you don't have false hope, and so that you'll look to find some other appliance that might give you the fulfillment and satisfaction that you're really looking for. Now, one of the things that Solomon does in this book, there's 2 or 3 different kinds of things. We'll kind of talk about it as we come to them. One of the things he does is he sort of conducted like an experiment. Now, he was king. He was wise. He had riches. He had pretty much anything he wanted. And so he tried out different things that you might think, I think this will do it. And he sort of gives the results of his experiment. And one of the things he tries out, he mentions here in those last few verses of chapter 1. What did he try?
Knowledge.
Yes, knowledge and wisdom. Now, a lot of people think that's where it's at. Get an education, learn a lot, philosophy, psychology, whatever. Just if you really knew enough, it would really fill you up. You'd feel so good about yourself, you'd really feel like you had everything under control. Well, what was his conclusion about that? Yeah, it actually didn't help. It kind of hurt because, he says in verse 15, he says, you got some crooked things that you can't straighten out, and you got some things that are lacking, there's too many to number. And so the wiser you get, the more of these frustrating, wrong things you see, and it just gives you a lot of grief and a lot of pain, because you find out a bunch of stuff you didn't want to know. Kind of like exploratory surgery. Sometimes you didn't want to know the results. The more you learn, the more frustrating it is. Years ago, I don't know if you're too young to do this, but any of you ever read Reader's Digest and knows what Reader's Digest is? Yeah, not many. But they had, it used to be better than it is now. They used to have, maybe they still do, a section that's called That's Outrageous. It's mostly things that like stupid politicians or judges or whatever did that were like wrong. They were wrong. And I always thought, man, if I could be president, I'd read Reader's Digest every month, and I'd correct those things. I'd make them, do the right thing. And it's like, the more you learn, the more things are wrong. The more you find out about life and about people and about situations that are like, no, it shouldn't be this way. And what you going to do about it? Yeah, many of those things, you're not going to do anything about. You can't straighten out all the crooked stuff. And you can't fill up all the stuff that's lacking. And so the more you know, the more bad stuff you know. It's not really where it's at. I'll make a point here about this. And that is, I am not against learning things. I'm not against getting an education. Not totally by my design, but my son's getting a master's degree right now. It's okay. I've got a bachelor's degree. But it really doesn't make a difference. It really didn't. It's not going to fill you up. It's not going to, it may help you if you want to do a certain profession. You're probably going to have whatever education it takes to do that profession. Or whatever. And that may help you make a living so you can eat. But you're not going to find fulfillment in that. It's not what matters. It's not going to make you a better person. It's not going to make you closer to God. You're not going to find something that you're going to say, wow, now I'm satisfied. Now, we hear it all the time. It's probably one of the things our culture presses on us the most. This is really going to be where it's at. Well, if you want to get an education, if your parents want you to get an education, I'm not going to say it's wrong. But I'm going to say, don't expect it's really going to do that much for you. It won't do it. All right, comments and thoughts on chapter 1. Yes, that's exactly right. If it is an under-the-sun thing, we won't get it, and it won't help us if we do. Beyond the sun, the Lord, and what's truly from Him, absolutely, that's meaningful, and that'll fill us up. And that's where He's ultimately going. The last couple verses of the book that's what really matters, and that's what will fill us up. But everything else, it's going to be empty, whether we think it will be or not. Yeah, you don't stress out about the things that don't make much difference anyway, because they're not going to make much difference anyway. It's amazing. You've done that before. You've gotten all uptight about something, and then, a while later you realize there was nothing anyway. What was I getting all uptight about? And that's true with everything here in this life. I mean, there's some things that may have some consequences for a short time, but they won't last long in this life. We're going to die soon. I know it doesn't seem like it, but, yesterday I was 16 and today I'm 51. What will that make me tomorrow? About 86 or something like that? I don't know. Probably won't last that long, so. Sometimes we act like, we'll say, well, these things aren't really, they won't save you. Well, that's true. But it's more than that. They won't fill you up. You won't be satisfied. You'll be empty after you get all that. And you'll think, I just didn't get enough. It's not the problem. They are inherently non-fulfilling. Learn that from this, so that you won't be disillusioned that you put all that effort into getting something that still doesn't fill you up. I think this is such an excellent point. And you've seen it sometimes. I've seen it more because I'm older. And man, it's so true. And you see it not only in yourself, you see it in everybody else. It's just amazing. This is not the main point of the book. This is a good illustration about just one angle of this. I was talking with a guy I've become really good friends with recently. And we were at a Bible study. And this was just the other day. And on the way home, we were several people. He was talking about the NBA game. I don't know if he's playing in the NBA at the moment, but one of these playoff games, and he was going to go home and watch that. He was all excited about it. I wanted to know if I was going to watch that. I said, well, I don't think I've looked at TV in the last few months. I'm probably not going to. I don't have time anyway. And then later on, it was just him and me the last few miles home, and I'm like, so how are you really doing? He said, I don't feel very good about today. He said, I studied and all that, but I just didn't feel very productive. I just didn't feel like I got very much out of it. I just feel kind of frustrated. And he said, I'm going to go home. I'm going to really try to study and get more out of it. I'm like, what about the game? He said, I thought about it and I realized if I watch that game, I'm just going to feel worse. If I feel like I haven't been productive. He said, I think I'd feel a lot better if I'd lock myself in my room and just make myself study. Now, that's just one specific application. But it's like, there's a lot of truth to that. It's not long to watch a ball game. But does it fill you up? If you're really depressed, is it going to really, wow, I feel great after this? No. It's not going to do it. It may be fun. It may be fun to watch. But, you're not going to be fulfilled because you become a great ball game watcher. Or or anything else in this life. That's the point so far. Other thoughts?